Good morning, and how's everybody doing today? It's good to see everybody in class. Looks like we've got a hearty 12 students today. Hello, Etta, Anastasia, Keelan, Gita. Good to see everybody. Leanne, buenos dias to you. Nicole, hello. It's gonna happen. No sound today. Leanne, I thought about you 2 minutes before class started, so you didn't get me this time. I have the sound turned off on my phone. I did have a big laugh at myself. I did have a big laugh at myself about 3 minutes before class because I caught myself. Hi, Jack. Good to see you. So you think I'm gonna do this again before the semester ends? Probably. Of course. Thanks for the vote of confidence. You folks do know me so well. I can't help it. All right. So, you ready to go ahead and get started? How many of you decided that you're good liars this week? I enjoyed the webinar. Hope you can see micro expressions now and you can begin to sort out the truths and the lies in your class. Okay, cool. All right. So let's go ahead and get talking about emotions today. So we're going to talk briefly about emotions, sort of introduce them, talk about why they're important. We're going to talk about 3 classic theories of emotions. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the brain physiology associated with emotions. And then we'll talk about emotional development and learning how to regulate your emotions. Okay, so you know what? You can look everywhere you want, and everybody's going to have a different definition of what an emotion is. Is it short term? Is it long term? What is exactly is all goes into it? Are they positive, negative? So really, there's no one definition of an emotion, but let's say it's a biological state that is characterized by neurological changes that lead to a characteristic pattern of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. So when you're angry, your body goes into a physiological state that causes you to feel a certain way, to think a certain way, and to act a certain way. When you're embarrassed, your body has a physiological response which causes you to feel a certain way, to think a certain way, and act a certain way. Now, while there's no really good way to define emotions, everybody pretty much agrees that you can think of emotions as having sort of 2 qualities. They have what's known as a valence, which is either positive or negative, and they have a level of arousal. They either get you jazzed up or they cause you to get relaxed. So really, you can think about all the emotions that we might have, and you can put them on this wheel, which compares them on these 2 dimensions. And in fact, on your weekly homework, I'm going to ask you to do that, to sort of understand your emotions. So if you're stressed, we might say that that includes a negative valence, that is, it's not a good emotion, but stress always causes your biological system, your nervous system, to go in. Now, the neat thing about emotions is that they sort of help us to evaluate our environment and pick behaviors and directions and things to do and places to go, right? So your gut feeling, your emotion is sort of it's the grand amalgam of all the things that are happening to you right now. It's your evaluative sort of physiological response. And this allows you to pick what you want to do in your environment. So think about emotions as really sort of organizing our behavior. Without an emotion, you wouldn't know what to do, right? But emotions sort of organize our behavior and help us sort of engage in purposeful behavior. Uh-oh. Did I lose everybody? Wonder why it cut out for a minute. How much did you lose, folks? I probably didn't say anything that was that important. We talked about valence and energy. Oh, for good. Okay. All right. Good enough. Now, here's the thing. There's a long tradition in emotion. In fact, emotion was one of the first things that psychologists started talking about, even before there were really a lot of psychologists around. So what I'd like to do is talk about these three historical theories with an idea of kind of giving you the important points that can be summarized from these three models. Now, the first fellow was a fellow named William James. Do you folks remember William James? He was one of the fathers of psychology. What did William James contribute to the birth of psychology? Does anybody remember? Damn! Tara, that is absolutely impressive. I am shocked, gratified. In fact, I think I'm getting ready to cry. I'm so excited that somebody remembered that. Holy cow, thank you very much. It's a great moment in my life. I'm so moved. Okay, even remembered the Jimmy part, right. Well, he had the first theory, and he had sort of this idea. He understood that we have these physiological responses to motion, and we also have emotional thoughts. He argued that the physiological response occurs first, and what your brain does is it reads your physiological response to come to an idea of what emotion you are feeling. So when a bear comes up and roars at you, he argues the first thing that starts doing is your heart starts beating fast and your palms get sweaty, and your body interprets that physiological arousal to arrive at the emotion of fear. And so he sort of argued that our body tells our mind what emotions to have. And there's actually research to support this. It's called the facial feedback hypothesis. There's a picture in your textbook of somebody with a pencil in their mouth. And it turns out that when you put a pencil in between your teeth, you make a smile, if you will. This is sort of a smile. See that? On the other hand, if you take the pencil and put it up here, I can't even do it. Hold on. That's sort of a frown, if you will. And what they do is they have people read comics while putting the pencil either up here or down here, and it turns out people will rate funny stories as funny if they are making this smiley face. Exactly. That's why he doesn't have a mustache, right? Sorry, couldn't do it. Actually, the problem was I put it in my mouth and got it wet, and it kept slipping right off my nose. But the idea is that our body tells our brain what emotion to have. That's sort of the James Lange theory. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the fight or flight response. Anybody ever heard that term? That was coined by a fellow named Walter Cannon. And Walter Cannon had a competing theory. He said, you know what? Your body may have this physiological response, but your brain is getting the information at the same time. And so he argued really that the physiological experience and the cognitive experience occur at the same time. And your emotion results from the combination of these two processes occurring at the same time. So I see the bear and my frontal lobe tells me I should be scared of it. And at the same time, my heart starts beating because my heart is scared of it. And put those two together and I come up with the final emotion. Now, both of these gentlemen understood that there were two components to an emotion: a basic physiological response and then a cognition, if you will. Now, kind of interesting, a fellow named Stanley Schachter, probably 50 or 60 years later, had an even better idea. he realized that emotions, sometimes different emotions, have the same physiological response. So if you get excited and you're happy at a football game, right, because your team is winning, your hands are going to be sweating, your heart's going to be beating fast, and you're going to be breathing. However, when your boyfriend, girlfriend, or whoever makes you really, really mad, your palms are going to get sweaty, your heart's going to start beating, and you're going to start breathing. If you think about it, the physiological response maybe for excitement and happiness and anger are the same physiological component. How could they have the same physiological response and lead to different emotions? This guy, Stanley Singer, a social psychologist, mind you, like myself, said really what he thinks happened is you have a physiological response and then you look around your environment and you interpret your emotion based upon what's going on around you. So if my heart starts beating fast and my palms get sweaty and I'm surrounded by 42,000 other awesome Carolina fans at a football game, I come to the final conclusion that I must be happy because Carolina's beating up on NC State. On the other hand, if my heart starts beating fast, my palms are sweaty, and I'm standing there looking at my wife, I realize I might be angry because she told me something. So I come to a different emotional response. Does that make sense? Not in football. Ooh, ow, that hurts, Mike. That hurts. You know my heels are on the rise. Okay. What about freezing in fright, fight, or flight? You know, the weird thing is, you know what? Can we save that for chapter 11 when we talk about the physiological response of arousal? If I get started talking about that, Keelan, I will spend 15 minutes and not get to the lecture. But I promise you I will talk about that. Okay? Yeah. That's the only thing that popped into my mind, Leanne. I guess I'm a one-track mind here. So he did this really crazy experiment that you can't do anymore because you're not allowed to keep. You would have difficulty having an IRB board agree to let you give adrenaline pills to people. But he brought people into his laboratory and did this really elegant experiment to demonstrate the flexibility of our emotional response. So he brought people into his laboratory one at a time, and he had one independent variable where he gave them a pill, but that pill was either an adrenaline pill or it was a sugar pill. Okay, so one pill he gave them caused them to have the fight or flight response, the physiological response. The other one had no response, had no effect on them at all. Right? So he then puts these people into a room after giving them the pill and says, you know what? I need you to fill out some paperwork. We'll be getting started with the experiment in about 15 minutes. While they're sitting in that room, another person comes in who's working for the experimenter, and that person fakes one of two emotions. They either get angry, they start filling out the paperwork, and they get angry and frustrated because it's a stupid questionnaire that they don't want to fill out, or they act super elated and excited to be in the experiment, and they start laughing and joking and having a great time. He then, at the end of this 15-minute period, asked the participant to report their feeling of emotion. Now, if you look in the lower box with the sugar pills down at the bottom, these people had no physiological response to interpret. So whether or not they saw the angry model or the happy model, their emotional state wasn't affected. They reported the same level of emotion in both of these cases. However, in the adrenaline condition, the people had a physiological response to interpret. Those people who were around the angry model interpreted their arousal as anger. Those who were experiencing the physiological arousal and were in front of the happy model reported themselves to be in a happy mood. So in a sense, not only are emotions composed of physiological responses and cognitions, but it's not necessarily like one leads to the other. I don't know if any of you have ever been around a 3-year-old kid that's running around and acting crazy, but suddenly they might fall and hit their head. and a kid will get up and look at you. Half the time, if you'll smile, the kid will start smiling too. It's only when they see you go, "Oh, baby, are you okay?" that they actually cry. I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience with a child. But it's an old parenting trick. If your kid falls or hurts themselves, smile at them, and you might be able to cajole them from crying. If you do get panicked, they will cry. Yeah, to a certain extent, as soon as they bump their head, it may hurt a little bit, but their heart starts beating fast, and they're looking for a way to interpret that physiological arousal. You can actually sort of condition or shape your kid's resultant emotional effect. And kept playing. There you go. The most monotonous voice just says yes or no at this point. There you go. Keelan's got a good strategy. She wants to know if the kid's all right because she's a mom, but she's not going to raise her voice and make it sound like an emergency. Are you okay? And the little kid hopefully just gets up and keeps on going. Right? Okay, let's see. All right. So, now, those are sort of three old classic theories, and the one thing they share is the understanding that emotions have a cognitive component and emotionals have a physiological component. So really, when you think about it, you can go to the brain and sort of see this. Now, from an evolutionary standpoint, emotions are very important for making us complex animals, all right? Because we can attach emotional value to objects in our environment, we can become more complex animals, and we don't have to function on just operant and classical conditioning. It allows us, in a sense, to decouple our behavior from reflexes or simple learning behavior, because we can learn these overall orientations towards objects and situations. So emotions allow us to really become more complex organisms, all right? So when you think about it, just remember, emotions are really important for making you a complex animal. And if you think about it, on Facebook, what do most people do when they're trying to convince you of their point of view? They show you a sick mom or a hungry dad or somebody being treated unfairly. Almost all of your Facebook advertisements, your social media arguments are going to be based around emotional points. And it's because emotions are so important to helping us organize and think about our environment. Or scare you with Jesus. They do that too, absolutely. Now, here's the deal. Remember, emotions help us facilitate complex social interactions. They help regulate us by knowing what it is I want to do. But more important, emotions help us have smoother social interactions. If you've ever done something bad to someone before, you know that it is very important for you to show them your guilty face. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You know I wouldn't do that to you. I feel so terrible. That's an Oscar moment right there. Did you feel the guilt and the sadness, man? Didn't you just freaking love it? You were like, holy cow, I forgive you, Chris. I forgive you. Kirko's calling me a bad liar. Okay, I thought that was an Oscar-worthy guilt moment. But guilt, pride, and these other emotions, social emotions, allow us to regulate our social interactions. I can tell you when I'm mad and you better change your behavior. I can tell you when I'm guilty and you can forgive me for whatever it is I did. So we can sort of use emotions to communicate with each other, right? Now, let's think about the brain. The parts of your nervous system involved in emotional processing. You've got the amygdala. Remember, I told you that was your primary emotional center, that sort of your fight or flight center. That's the first thing that activates, that creates that fight or flight cascade that we will have. So your hypothalamus connects to your, your pineal gland, I think, which then cascades your adrenal gland, which then cascades the fight or flight response to the rest of your body. So you've got this amygdala, which is really, really, really important for having an emotional response, a positive or a negative emotional response. Now, you also have two parts of your brain which allow you to fully use this emotional content. Number one is you have the temporal lobes, and you can store memories of things. And part of our memories for all things are the emotional content we feel with those memories. So when you hear the word circus, some of you have a warm, fuzzy feeling about circus. Some of you who are scared by a clown have a negative, cold feeling about circus. Some of you, when somebody says you're a psych teacher, you better have a warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart because you love your psych teacher so much, right? So in a sense, Michael, I'm starting to dislike you with that Tar Heel stuff, man. I'm telling you, I'm coming to get you, man. I'm coming to get you. So we also, all of our memories have an emotional content, and that's how you sort of store things. So when you think about something, it creates an emotion in you, and that helps you direct your behavior. And then not only do we have that, but you have your frontal lobe where you can put one and one together and sort of interpret events, because you have to figure events out to see if they're sad or not, right? If I see a team if I turn on the TV and I see a football game where a team is getting beat badly, I have to see who the team is. If it's NC State, I start laughing. If it's Carolina, I start crying. And if it's Duke, I jump up and down for joy and I call my father, right? No, shit's not about to go down. You're funny. Okay, so, and the weird thing is they've actually done research with the lobes, and typically negative emotions tend to be processed in the right frontal lobe, and positive emotions tend to be processed in the left frontal lobe. Now, the weird thing is damage to these different parts of the brain affects your emotional response. So research has shown that damage to the amygdala in humans impairs people's abilities to look at faces and see if those faces are sad or happy. You might not be surprised to find out that females tend to have more metabolically active amygdalas than do men. And this is why females may be better at reading nonverbal emotional cues. Right? Oh, we're a psych gang, and we like everybody except for those people that drink pumpkin spice coffee. I don't know if we like them too much, but the rest of them are okay. Okay? So, that was for you, Leanne. So, that's the frontal lobes. Now, damage to the prefrontal cortex may impair your ability to express complex emotional responses. So when you see a car wreck on the side of the road and you see somebody hurt, we're all able to feel that twinge of emotion and sadness for the person who's hurt on the side of the road. Your book talks about a memory researcher, Antonio Damasio, who had a patient with damage to their right frontal lobe. And when they would look at pictures of people in car wrecks, they would say, I know I'm supposed to be feeling sad right now, but I just don't have that emotion. Right? So it's kind of weird. The amygdala, when you see things, it's that fight or flight that responds positively or negatively when you're scared or interested in something. Your memory is where you sort of store the amygdala effects that all the different objects in your environment cause you. And then your frontal lobe is where you put these things together to come to your final emotional evaluation of what it is you see, right? And so your book's going to talk about what we would call a fast and a slow part of your brain. Your amygdala is your fast emotional center. When something happens and your heart rate immediately shoots up. That's your amygdala. And then most of us, if you learn a little bit of emotional control, your frontal lobe will readjust the final emotion. If you've ever had somebody jump out behind a door and scare the hell out of you, you go through two emotions quickly. The first one is abject terror, because jumping out from behind, when somebody startles you, it scares you. But as soon as you see that it's your roommate or your mom or your boyfriend or your friend or whoever playing a trick on you, you quickly switch emotions to one of either anger, if you didn't want that to happen, or laughter and hilarity if you think that was a funny joke, right? That's an example of your brain managing your emotions, your frontal lobe managing your emotional response. So we have sort of a fast emotional response and we have a slow emotional response. You do get scared. You know what? And it turns out that all of us have a certain level of arousal that we need to be stimulated. And some people need more stimulation than do others. In fact, they argue that the activity of your reticular activating system, which is this nerve fiber in the middle of your brain stem, may determine your personality style. Riley, if you get scared really easily, you may be an introverted person. They say that introversion, extroversion may be related to your desire for stimulation. So if you get spooked a little bit easier, that may be because your physiological system requires less arousal. Even when you know it's coming, you get scared. That's funny. There you go, you're hella introverted. You know what? That's because your brain needs less stimulation to be happy. There you go. I love it when I'm right, when I get lucky. I stumble into being right. You don't scare easy? You haven't been scared by me yet, Aish. Okay. I feel attacked. Oh, y'all. Okay, everybody leave off on the pumpkin spice. You know what, Leanne? I'm going to Starbucks today, and I'm going to have a coffee pumpkin spice latte in your honor. How about that? And she always has a feeling someone's hiding behind the corner. Well, you know what? They might be, Etta. You just don't know. Okay, so why is this important? You should feel appreciated, Leanne. I so appreciate you. Right? I love to be somebody's nemesis. You don't like pumpkin spice either? I'll lay off Christmas. Thank you for laying off Christmas till at least Thanksgiving, right? Okay. So, if you remember, I don't know, actually this might be out of order. Basic emotions, we all have 7 basic facial emotions. And so we have these physiological responses that sort of are hardwired into the system. Anger, fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, surprise, and contempt. Excuse me. And the weird thing is, you will see some of these emotions occur very early in life. And you'll see these, you can see contentment and anger and sadness in babies pretty early. So we have these sort of hardwired in the system. However, and what Paul Ekman found is that you can see these in a universal setting. So they appear to be in all of us. What differ are what we would call display rules, which are rules learned through socialization that dictate when and how emotions are displayed. Now, he was talking about differences between cultures such as Western and Eastern cultures, African versus Asian versus European, but really you can think about even the enculturation we have here in the United States for between males and females, between different parts of the country. And these display rules are culturally bound, and they tell us when and how we are supposed to display emotions, right? And so that's sort of an important thing to think about. So we've got this physiological part. And again, these display rules are more cognitive, more frontal lobe driven. Now, why does all this matter? Because it is up to you, my dear parents, to help your children learn how to control their emotion. Now, the reason that babies cry, if you see this little kid under here crying, the reason that babies cry is because they haven't myelinated the connections in their frontal lobe and the connections between their frontal lobe and their amygdala. So the baby can't control these physiological responses that they're having. That's babies, though. However, what they need to develop, what needs to happen is their brain needs to myelinate, right? But not only does it have to myelinate, but remember we talked about dendritic spreading and the importance of training behaviors during critical periods. There's a critical period in early childhood when you, the parent, need to help your child learn how to control their emotions. Now, we're not trying to make those emotions go away. Okay, we don't want to stifle our children's emotions. We want to teach our children how to be in control of their emotions. Okay, exactly, Tara, they need that EQ. They need to be able to understand and control their own emotions. And this is not something that is innately born in you. You have the emotional hardware, but just like all of your other abilities, you need to develop it. And it's much easier to develop in early childhood than it is to develop as a 35-year-old person in therapy. Okay, now it's a key to adult success, and in fact, in my developmental psychology class, I talked about it last week. Emotional regulation may be more important than self-esteem in terms of your adult outcomes. Okay, school outcomes, getting along with peers, having friend outcomes, job outcomes, all of these things are going to be dependent upon your ability to control your emotions. You know what? We could all learn to be better with our emotions, Keelan. Meditate. We could all learn to be better with our emotions, right? But what I was dismissed and I'm fine. Okay. Are you fine, Etta? That's the question I would ask. I would ask, are you fine? Or deep down, if I went into a therapeutic dive into your psyche, would I find problems, Etta? I know I'm just playing with you. I'm sure you are. But we'll talk about that. I actually grew up sort of in an emotional dismissing environment as well. So what they say you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to do with your children is you're supposed to watch your kids' emotions and pay attention, be sensitive to their emotions. But the idea is not to dismiss the emotion, but to show the kid how to appropriately use that emotion. So you use emotional events as coaching experiences. So if your kid starts crying because they can't come because you have to go home from the park, okay, your kid's going to start crying. Your little 3-year-old kid's going to start crying. So what you should do is say, you know what, Johnny, I know you're sad. We're leaving the park and you have a really good time and it makes you sad when we leave the park. But just remember, we're coming back to the park tomorrow. So we'll be back to the park. So don't let this make you sad. And so I know, Etta, you're from Poland and they have a different cultural idea about child rearing. I've heard you mention it a couple of times. I'm getting the feeling I know where you're from. It actually reminds me, honestly, Poland sounds an awful lot like Georgia in the United States, where they're a little more strict on their upbringing. And I know this may sound like sort of a weak thing to do. It's not that you're keeping your kid at the park, Etta. It's not that we're giving in to them. But what we're doing is we're identifying the emotion and explaining to them and helping them realize why it's not the correct emotional response, right? Now, what my parents used to say is, shut up that crying. You better stop that crying or I'll give you something to cry about. So that was sort of the emotion dismissing approach. Exactly. And I'm from a small southern Georgia town. I was actually, well, I'm not. My family is historically from Waycross, Georgia, which is way down on the Florida border. I actually happened to be born in Mobile, Alabama, but I was brought up in that small rural country life, and so I think Etta, you and I were probably brought up the same way. Or wait until we get home. Ooh, there you go. That's a good one. That's a good way to be emotionally dismissing. Anybody else got another great idea for emotionally dismissing? I'll give you something to cry about, boy. 30 houses. Wow, okay. Waycross wasn't quite that small, but it was small. You got told. Yep. Okay. So, what I want you to know is that there's sort of, let's think of it as a critical period. I don't know, biologically speaking, but there's a time in your life when it is important for you as a parent to begin coaching these children. You have to teach them how to look at life with a sense of humor. You have to teach them how to distract themselves from the things that make them mad sometimes. And most importantly, you have to teach them how to develop a sense of perspective. The reason with your friends who get been out of control emotionally as adults is because they don't realize that today's soup of the day is not that big a deal, or just because the bread maker isn't working isn't the biggest deal of the day. What you'll notice is most people, a lot of times with these anger issues, seem to take everything as if it's so freaking important, right? And yeah, right. That's a good one. That's a good one. Tara Solomon. Well, I don't know what you're crying about. When I was a kid, blah, blah, blah. You know what? I heard that one too. As if my emotional experience right here, right now doesn't matter, right? That doesn't mean my feelings. If yes, you had it bad, but it doesn't mean my feelings are invalid, right? You don't really feel that. You're seeking attention. Ooh, ooh, that's a good one. That's an insult wrapped in some emotional dismissing, right, Keelan? Because they're suggesting that you're doing it for nefarious purposes. Think about how bad that is. I am super sad right now, and you're accusing me of hurting your feelings. It's kind of a sort of a sneaky way to be mean to your kid, right? Yeah, I try to hide my my southern upbringing when I can. But if I get around family and it's a holiday and we've had a couple of beers, suddenly that Georgia twang comes right on out, brother, and you can hear it. Mm-mm-mm. Boy, I just can't even begin to tell you. Sometimes I'm fixing to speak like I never went to school at all. Toxic. Yeah, it can be toxic parenting, Kimia. Kimia. That's exactly what it is. Spanked me and prevented me from wanting to repeat the behaviors, causing the physical. This is about you hit. You need to make. Right, and I don't want the research suggesting the research about the link between spanking and violent behavior does not necessarily say that spanking is bad. However, spanking can be less efficient than other methods of child rearing. And when you do it, Michael Kirko is right. You have to make it count if you're going to do it. Crick. Right. There is no perfect parenting style. This is true. But if we know a little bit about emotional, hopefully we can help our kids deal with their emotions in a better way. And it just makes it a little bit easier for your kid to fit in school if their emotions are under control, being able to control your emotions, right? So every time you think about this, just think about that adult that you're around that has no emotional control, that dude with the anger management problems, that coworker that cries every day, that coworker whose life is ruled by disasters. Think about those people, and really, they're not very happy most of the time. And so, what you can do as a parent, hopefully during the 2 to 5 years of age, is give your kid a strong foundation in understanding and dealing with their own emotions. Yeah, you don't want to use a belt. Mike, my dad had this belt with lots of holes in it, and he would spank me. He would always wait until I was getting ready to take a bath, and after I got my freaking pants off, he'd then come and whip my naked ass. And that hurt. Did not care for that. Okay. Parenting is hard. Okay. Very good. I'm glad some of you were laughing. I hope some of you were learning. I hope we had a little bit of fun this hour. That's all about a butt buster. A butt buster? The hell is a butt buster? Oh my God. Okay, Chris Figueroa has a question. Like a cricket paddle. Ooh. Right? Any of you get spanked in school? I got spanked in elementary school several different times. I know, right? Okay, what's your question, Chris? Your mom had a paddle, a wooden spoon, dazed and confused. No, I missed it. I got to check that out. You just check back, won't let you access the homeworks to see your old grades? Okay, so I think those. Have any of you looked at your grades in the grade book, and can you see your homework grades? Jesus, a metal ruler. You know, my dad told me that back in the 50s when he went to school, if you got in trouble at school, they would spank you at school and then they would take you home so your parents could spank you too. So, Terex, I can see my homework grades. Okay, all right, here's the deal, Chris. No questions. It says no questions posted. What grades are you looking at? On chapter 10, 11, 12, and 13, I haven't posted the homework questions yet. So all you can see in terms of homework questions are homeworks 1 through 9 at this point. So Nicole is clearly not a fan of having the school whip her child's, but you know, if I'd have been your child, you might have changed your opinion. I was kind of a hooligan in elementary school, Nicole. Interesting, though. Interesting, right? So Nicole would go up there and whoop some butt. I hear you. Okay, well, you know what? That's all I have to say. I hope you learned a little bit about emotions today, about the parts of the brain responsible for emotion, about helping your children develop a good emotional regulation abilities. And I hope you do remember that really cool study by Stanley Schachter on the misattribution of emotions. I don't know if any of you have any questions for me. You should feel free to type them in. I'm getting ready to close off the lecture right now. If anybody has any questions, I'll stay in the chat bar for a few minutes answering those questions, or you can send me a Remind note, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you on Remind. Remember, discussion board number 9 is due tomorrow night by 11:59. Go ahead and get your credit. Go ahead and get your discussion board done. And Neuromatrix number 9, How Do You Feel, opens tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Good luck to everybody on the Neuromatrix. You folks have a great day, and I will see you soon. Take care.